Let's dive into some photo editing, let's dive into Lightroom, and let's talk about dodging and burning. Wait for the guitar. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where every single week, every Tuesday, you get a brand new, fresh photography tutorial. Now this week, we're diving back into photo editing. We're in Lightroom, and we're going to be talking about dodging and burning. Now, if you're not familiar with dodging and burning, it's the process of affecting shadows and highlights in your image, but specific parts of your image. So rather than going in and making global adjustments, adding contrast to the whole image and things like that, you're going to be going in and painting in specific areas. Now, this is a great way of adding atmosphere, adding a bit of drama, just making your image stand out and pop. It's used a lot in beauty shots, fashion shots, portraiture in general, actually. I use it for all kinds of portrait shots. I'd say I'd use it for the majority of my portrait shots. But I also use it for landscape, cityscapes, all kinds of stuff. Now today we're going to be focusing more on portrait, where I'd say it's probably used more widely. But we can always do another video on landscape, dodging and burning as well, if that'd be of interest. Now before we dive in to Lightroom, I should probably say up front, I normally do this in Photoshop. So I normally edit my photo in Lightroom with the global adjustments and stuff like that, and I'll take it into Photoshop for things like dodging and burning. But we're doing it in Lightroom today. I've had a few people asking me, is it possible to do it in Lightroom? Is it possible to get that kind of same effect? And I've had a play. I've done some research and kind of had a play in Lightroom with a few different photos. It definitely is possible. It's absolutely there. You don't have quite so many options because in Photoshop you've got layers and all kinds of things like that to work with, adding blurs and stuff like that. But it's absolutely possible to do it in Lightroom. So if you only have access to Lightroom, this is definitely a way that you can do some dodging and burning to your photos. So with that said, let's dive into Lightroom and I'll show you what we're going to be working with. So I've got two photos here. This is the first one. It's a portrait. This was taken actually with the Sigma 35mm f1.2. Ooh, what a lens. We've actually got a video about that lens coming out very shortly, so check our YouTube channel for that. But otherwise you can see it's a fairly shallow depth of field, so the eyes are in focus using a Sony camera, but otherwise there's a lot of blurred out areas. And I've already gone and edited, I've done a global edit to this image already, but we're going to go ahead and affect certain areas, bringing out the highlights, making certain things pop, and then deepening those shadows in certain areas as well. So I'm going to show you exactly what we're going to do. So first and foremost, we're going to come up here to our adjustment brush. So in the top right, you can click on the adjustment brush. That's going to bring up the settings that you can now paint on using your adjustment brush. I'm going to double click on the effect here. That's just going to reset everything. And then we're going to start off with, I think we're going to start off with burning, so affecting the shadows. Now, first things first, I'm going to affect some of my settings here for what I'm going to be painting on. I'm going to bring the shadows all the way down, and I'm going to bring the blacks down to about minus 20, minus 21, something like that. We can always adjust this after the fact as well, so we can make adjustments later. And in terms of my brush, I want the feather up to 100 because I don't want any hard edges to what I'm painting on. And I'm going to bring the flow down to about 26. Now, ultimately with dodging and burning, you want to build it up. You don't want to just paint on something crazy and yeah, it just wouldn't look good. You want to be building it up gradually. You want to think of it as applying a gradual thing, so it doesn't always look like much is happening at first. But then later when we go to turn it on and off, you'll see a massive difference. So I'm going to keep the flow at 26. That's going to allow me to really control how much I'm painting on. I can go back over areas, but without painting on 100% at all times. Now with that said, we're ready to actually start painting onto our image. Now what we want to be doing is effectively going over areas of shadow that we want to enhance, that we want to emphasize. So I'm going to begin over here on the left side. You can see this is just natural light in this photo, but you can see the light seems to be coming in from the right hand side of the photo, and over here we've got a little bit of shadow. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start painting in on this left side. Now if you can't see much happening, you can always press O on your keyboard. That's going to allow you to see the mask of what you're drawing. You can also adjust your brush size by using the scroll wheel on your mouse, so that's pretty easy as well. I'm going to go ahead and draw in kind of around. I'm going to go ahead and turn the mask off so I can actually see the photo more clearly, and I'm just going to paint in around these edges here. Now I'm also going to come in over this side and just sort of paint in around the hairline a little bit kind of around the jaw. Now this photo we don't have the actual jawline, otherwise we'd definitely be doing that. And I'm going to come in here to where the nose is, just get a little bit of this. And then a big one for me is always just around the eyes, kind of above. It's going to make the eyes pop really nicely. So let's go ahead and just paint that on. Now what's nice about this way of doing it, using the shadows all the way down to -100, really it is just going to be affecting the shadows. You're not going to be darkening light areas of skin, for example, or anything like that, because it is specifically affecting the shadows in the photo already. So you're not just using exposure or anything like that. We will talk about that in a moment, but this is quite a nice way of controlling what you're actually doing here. Now already we can it doesn't necessarily look like much has happened, but we can go ahead and turn that off and back on by clicking this little switch down here. So you can see that has actually made a bit of a difference already. We can, if you feel like it's not doing enough, we can always bring the exposure down just a touch. Now you want to be careful with this, because if you go too mad, that looks crazy. So you want to be really subtle with this. You're really not trying to make it look ridiculous, unless that's what you're going for, in which case absolutely. But I always think the best thing about dodging and burning, if you do it right, it almost doesn't look like you've done anything. It just looks like a good photo. No one's going to sit there and think, oh wow, nice bit of dodging and burning on that. That's the key. I think subtlety, with pretty much everything we've ever covered, I think subtlety is key. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead up here and click new. That's going to allow us to create a new mask. I'm going to double click effect there again, which is going to reset all of those settings. And I'm going to do the exact opposite. So I'm going to bring highlights all the way up to 100 and then whites up to about 21 as well. So again, we can go in and affect this later. If we feel like it's too crazy, we can dial down a lot of what we're doing here. But for now, let's start with that. It at least allows us to see what we're doing, and you can see an obvious difference once you painted this on. Now, to begin with, let's go ahead and something that I'll almost always start with when I'm dodging, which is the brightening of certain areas. I'm going to go into the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to paint over this eye, and I'm going to paint over the other eye as well. Next, we want to be looking for areas of kind of natural highlights. So kind of up the nose here, generally looks pretty good. Onto the forehead. Down and under the eyes and across the cheeks. And again, this is only really going to be affecting the actual highlights in the photo, as opposed to affecting, again, the darker areas. If we did it here, not a lot is going to happen. I'll press Ctrl-Z to undo that unnecessary bit of editing. I think that actually looks really good already. We can come up here to the hair and maybe do a little bit across some of this. And if I turn this on and off, what a massive difference this is making. Again, maybe you think it's too much, maybe it's too dramatic. I think for a beauty shot or for commercial shots, this is great. For general portraiture, you probably want to dial it down a little bit, but we can go in and do that. I'm going to show you how we can do that in a moment. So that looks pretty good. I'm actually going to go ahead and dial the exposure up on this brush as well, just a touch, a little bit like we did with the other one, just to really make those eyes pop out of the frame. I think that looks awesome. I'm actually really, really happy with that. Now, I'm mostly just concentrating on the face. We could go in and do some stuff on the hand here as well. That always looks good. It's important not to get carried away with just one area, like the face, and that looks like crazy good. But then the rest of the photo is like, oh, this is a weird looking photo. The face is all edited and amazing, and then everything else is quite flat, and so it's important not to get too carried away. But you can switch between the masks. I've got this one here. You can switch between the masks by finding the other little dot there to indicate where the mask is. And then that's going to take us back to the other mask, which we can just start painting on. So I've painted on a little bit of exposure on the fingers there. I'm just going to paint on the burning, so the darkening on there as well. Let's just turn everything on and off. Massive, massive difference. Let's make sure to put some darkening in the hair. I'm going to bring the flow up a little bit because with the hair, I'm not so worried about being as subtle. You know, it doesn't matter as much. So let's go ahead and do that. Great. I think that looks awesome. Now, like I say, if you think that's too much, we can go ahead. So we can select whichever mask it is. We can go ahead and change things, I should say. We can go ahead and select whichever mask it is. So let's stick with the burning mask, so the shadows. And with that selected, you've still got the settings up here. I can go ahead and I can reduce how much the shadows are going down by. I can do it to -36 instead of -100 or -25. Whatever looks good. I can reduce how much we're doing the black spy as well, if that seems like it's too much. We can really, you know, we'll get rid of that exposure bump that I was doing. We can really go ahead and fine tune this a little bit. It's similar with the other mask. You just go ahead and select the other mask there. We can go ahead and get rid of that exposure bump. We can bring the highlights back down. We can bring the whites back down so that it's not as crazy. That actually looks quite nice. That's kind of pretty subtle. Let's turn things on and off. Yeah, that is actually quite nice rather than really over the top. So it kind of comes down to personal taste and how far you want to go with it. You know, sometimes it's better to start off almost overdoing it, because then you can see where you are putting things. You can see how much it's affecting the image. And it can just make it easier to draw it on, and then you can go back and just reduce that. This is a technique that I use, like I say, pretty much in all portraiture. Certainly in beauty shots, fashion, close-up portraits. It can just really make things like the eyes pop, any natural highlights, the shadows. It just adds a bit of atmosphere to things. It just makes it look really, really good. Now, like I say, if you'd be interested at all, we can do a nice video on dodging and burning on landscapes. We can do one on dodging and burning in Photoshop, which is a very different technique. And because you're using layers, you have a few more options for how you want things to kind of end up. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see any of those. Let me know if you have any questions as well, because I always am interested to answer those, as well as any thoughts on dodging and burning in general and kind of photo editing, anything you'd like to see in the future as well. If you like the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That always helps us out. Make sure to subscribe as well for new content. Obviously, new tutorials every Tuesday. New stuff all the time. Watch out for that video on the Sigma 35mm f1.2 lens. Ooh. That's coming certainly either today or tomorrow, I would have thought, and that is quite a lens. That is quite a lens. Otherwise though, I'll see you in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.